Now, we're very fortunate and blessed that we're able to take a nice vacation every year. We set aside reserves for maintenance, around the house and do things like going out to eat or even having a weekend getaway now and then. But we wanted to position ourselves to be able to continue to do these things, along with helping out the kids and, someday grandkids too.
All right, so let me talk a little bit about what a 1031 exchange is and why it's beneficial to rental property owners. So the term gets its name from Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code. And this exchange allows you to sell a property held as an investment and swap it for a new one purchased for the same intention if the replacement property is of equal or greater value than the property you sold. I think that's pretty cool, right? Welcome to your Landlord Resource Podcast. Many moons ago, when I started as a landlord, I was as green as it gets. I may have had my real estate license, but I lacked confidence and the hands-on experience needed when it came to dealing with tenants, leases, maintenance, and bookkeeping. After many failed attempts, fast forward to today, Kevin and I have doubled our doors and created an organized, professionally operated rental property business. Want to go from overwhelmed to confident? If you're an ambitious landlord or maybe one in the making, join us as we provide strategies and teach actionable steps to help you reach your goals and the lifestyle you desire, all while building a streamlined and profitable rental property business. This is your Landlord Resource Podcast. Hey there, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is Stacy, and I'm here with my better half, known as Kevin. For the last 5 years or so, we have been very focused on our retirement planning. And if you're familiar with us at all, we are no spring chickens. I'm 52. Kev is 64. So to say we are a bit behind on planning is an understatement.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think it's 77% of Americans start retirement savings by the age of 27. And this is usually through an employer-based plan, which is great. And we certainly have encouraged the boys to start putting away some of their income. And they've actually done a really good job.
Yep. 2 of the 3 so far have done really well with that.
Now, in 2017, around when we started to look at our future through a financial eye, we found out that in the U.S., the average amount of retirement earmarked or saved was around about $110,000. And where our numbers were higher than that, not by a lot.
Nope, not enough. And we know that $110,000 sounds like a lot of money to have saved, but for retirement purposes, this comes out to about $350 a month that can be drawn off a low interest savings account over 30 years. Now, maybe for older folks who are already on Social Security, this amount might be enough to supplement the difference needed to survive, if there's no plans for travel or home maintenance or health emergencies. But for us, and I'm sure many other Americans out there, that extra $350 would barely keep the lights on every month. Not to mention that Social Security will likely face some serious challenges come 2035. According to the Business Insider, in 2035, Social Security will not have enough money to continue to fund our retirees. So for those who are receiving Social Security benefits already, the amounts are likely going to be lowered so the government can cover more people. Why did this happen? People are living a lot longer than they expected when they, did all the calculations and everything. And we don't care to start talking politics on here or speculate on anything and whether this will or won't happen. So we're going to focus on what we need. And let's just say we didn't have nearly enough to survive with or without those Social Security benefits.
Yeah. Now, we're very fortunate and blessed that we're able to take a nice vacation every year. We set aside reserves for maintenance, around the house. And do things like going out to eat or even having a weekend getaway now and then. But we wanted to position ourselves to be able to continue to do these things, along with helping out the kids and, someday grandkids too.
Yep.
As Stacy owned a couple of rental properties, I had been willed farming land back in North Dakota. Now, this land was homesteaded back in the late 1800s and was eventually, after many generations, handed down to me. Now, we mentioned earlier that we had some money saved in our IRA accounts. However, the income property we each owned truly was to be for our retirement. So, as we sat down and honestly evaluated financially what we had versus what we felt we needed, we found it was time to work on scaling our income properties. So, the farmland, while the sale of the crops provided a steady supplemental income for us, it was nice getting that check, October, November.
Yeah, in the fall.
It was pretty stagnant, and there was no real hope that it would grow significantly in the future. And I'll admit, it took me a while to come to a place where I was comfortable even thinking about selling the property. I had traveled back to North Dakota with my grandmother a couple times to check on the land, see where she was from. She moved out to California when she was 16. And she eventually gifted it to me just before she passed away in 2004 at the age of 99. Like I said before, this land had been in my family generations, and it took some time to set aside the emotional attachment of the property and finally treat it as the investment property it really was. Now, the family who had managed the farming of the land had done so for over 50 years, and they often asked if I was interested in selling. So the sale was easy in the sense I didn't have to wonder if my family's land would be in good hands. I mean, these folks had more dedication to and actual physical time on my land than I did. Now, there was really no need to travel back to complete the sale. However, when Stacy offered to go visit the land one more time, I jumped at it.
Yeah, I mean, well, this land meant a lot to you and your family, and I thought it might help you with closure. And also, if you were able to meet the guys who ran the land today and see those operations, I thought it might help out a little bit. Plus, selfishly, I wanted to see what your family was always talking about. I kind of felt out of the loop there.
Yeah, and I really wanted to kind of show you. And while actually it was the two brothers that were running the property for us, I had mainly, from phone and emails. I had never met them. Yeah, we met when I was like 5 years old. So it was nice to finally put a face to all our correspondence. So we headed back and we were able to connect, like I said, with these two brothers. And it worked out perfect for them because our land was adjacent to theirs. Now, they spent the entire day with us.
Yeah,
they
that was fun.
Took us out to the property. They showed us how the farming operation ran, which was really amazing.
Very impressive.
Yeah. And I was really glad that Stacy offered to go back and see it all.
I mean, I had no idea what went into farming land, but it was cute because even though it's now used for decoration, they still had that same tractor that Kevin sat on when he was 5 years old. And he sat on it again.
Let's just say I didn't fit on at the same time this time around, but I got up there. That was pretty cool. Also, they showed us an acreage map of the county and how the different areas were still referred to by the longtime owners' names. So even with the sale, my family name lives on back there. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we are going to be discussing the 1031 exchange that we did with this land last year, almost exactly a year ago. We'll talk about the ins and outs or rules of doing a 1031 exchange, as well as the details of what we experienced. Would we do it again? We'll let you know that too.
All right, so let me talk a little bit about what a 1031 exchange is and why it's beneficial to rental property owners. So the term gets its name from Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code. And this exchange allows you to sell a property held as an investment and swap it for a new one purchased for the same intention if the replacement property is of equal or greater value than the property you sold. Let me repeat that. A 1031 exchange allows you to sell a property held as an investment and swap it for a new one purchased for the same intention if the replacement property is of equal or greater value than the property you sold. So, this process allows you to defer capital gains on the sale if it is considered like kind property by the IRS. I think that's pretty cool, right? So, now, according to the IRS, properties are of like kind if they're of the same nature or character, even if they differ in grade or quality. So, virtually all real estate properties, whether raw land or those with substantial improvements, qualify as like kind. Examples of like kind properties may include raw land, like Kevin had, multifamily rentals, like I have, single family rentals, like I have, retail shopping centers, office buildings, industrial facilities, and storage facilities.
Which we wish we had.
Which, yeah, maybe. We'll see. In our case, farmland used to produce income is considered like kind to the fourplex apartment investment property we ended up buying. So be aware that REITs, real estate funds, or other securities do not qualify for a 1031 exchange. And also, real property in the United States is not like kind to real property outside of the U.S., so no foreign exchanges are allowed. Now, if you are not aware of what capital gains are, they are essentially the profit earned on the sale of your income property. You have to figure out where your basis is. So to keep it simple, take your purchase price of the income property, add any improvements that you've made, and this is your basis. The difference between the sales price and the basis is what is taxable. And if you exchange it all, you can defer that tax, ultimately never paying capital gains tax on your rental property. So, the gain in value from the time his grandmother transferred the property till now was substantial enough that if we elected to keep all the funds from the sale and pay the capital gains tax, we would potentially lose somewhere in the range of about $100,000. And by using a 1031 exchange, we were able to take that $100,000 and add it to the down payment, now affording a much higher valued property when purchasing our new multifamily property. So here's a tax question we'd wondered about with regards to capital gains. What if we still own the replacement property when we die? Do those capital gains get transferred to our heirs? So under our current federal income tax rules, any taxable gain would be completely washed away thanks to another favorable provision that steps up the tax basis of a deceased person's property to its date of death fair market value. So, under the current rules, taxable gains can be postponed indefinitely with like-kind swaps and then erased if you die while still owning that property. Your heirs can then sell the property and owe zero federal income tax or just a little tax based on the post-death appreciation if there is any. So another question that we had, what if we wanted to pull some of that profit out and not invest it all into the exchange property? You must use all net profit from the relinquished property to purchase the replacement property. Otherwise, you're going to have taxable consequences, also known as the boot.
Easy for you to say.
So, no, it wasn't. So we pulled some of the funds out from this sale to complete a few much needed home maintenance repairs and improvements. Therefore, we are responsible for the capital gains on the amount taken out for our personal use, also known as the boot.
Yeah, and even though we had to pay, some tax on that, it was nice to have options and pull a little out to get those repairs done and give us some peace of mind. Okay, so getting comps on rural farmland is not as easy as finding comparable sales for a single-family home or multi-family properties. Of course, location is always important, but boy, we learned about soil type, access to water, drainage. Those are just some of the components you look for when evaluating farmland, and it all makes sense. So with some research, which included helpful realtors in the area, we were able to get a firm understanding of what our property might sell for. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the family who leased the land from me was interested in buying it. And as much as selling to them was my first choice, as I saw it as a continuation of the land's custodian, I also realized this had to be a business decision too. Thankfully, after some negotiation, we agreed on a price and completed the transaction through a private sale.
Yeah, and it also helped that they were also doing a 1031 exchange of one of their rental properties to purchase the land, which was kind of funny. They sold their fourplex to buy your land. You
Right.
sold your land to buy a fourplex.
Yeah.
So, as a private sale, it helped quite a bit with the timing that was needed to pull off this 1031 exchange.
Yes. And as we all know, timing is everything.
It certainly is.
As this was our first experience with the 1031 exchange, we quickly learned that timelines are very important. So once a relinquished property closes, you have 45 days to identify the replacement property in writing, specifying the property you want to acquire. The IRS says you can designate 3 properties as long as you eventually close on one of them. You must close on one of those designated properties within 180 days. Now, these 2 timelines run concurrently, and every day counts, including weekends, holidays.
That was a tough one to
Yeah,
swallow.
so once it starts, the clock's ticking.
Yep.
Now, since the buyers of the land were doing a 1031 exchange as well, and being a private sale, we worked our closing day to give us each time to research and identify replacement properties. That helped a lot. Now, let me switch gears here a little and talk about qualified intermediaries, or QIs. An IRS requirement for a 1031 exchange is that the proceeds from the sale of your investment property must be held in escrow by a third party, known as a qualified intermediary. Basically, a 1031 exchange qualified intermediary sells a property for you. They hold the proceeds from the sale in a trust or escrow account to ensure the taxpayer never has actual or constructive receipt of the sale proceeds, then buys the replacement property and transfers the ownership to you. Before you sell your property, you must coordinate with your QI for the proper paperwork that outlines their role in the process. This will help preserve the tax deferral benefit, which is ultimately the whole point of a 1031 exchange. Additionally, a 1031 exchange intermediary is responsible for coordinating and drafting all the paperwork and organizing documentation for the sale and purchase of both properties. During escrow, they'll also work closely with the title company and receive the funds after the sale of the first property. With this being our first experience with a 1031 exchange, it was important to find the right QI. Recommendations obviously are always helpful, especially from someone you trust and who has had firsthand experience. Fortunately for us, the attorney back in North Dakota that was facilitating my land property sale had worked with a company named Asset Preservation Inc., API. They're a national 1031 exchange company, and he referred me to them as he had had a couple of good experiences with them. So after interviewing them and a couple other firms, I decided to use their services.
I think it also helped that there was an office not far from our home here in California. So we didn't have to worry too much about time differences and stuff when we were contacting them.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. We're getting referred by somebody back in North Dakota, and he said, "Have you ever heard of these?" And yeah, they were right down the road from us in California.
Yeah, not far at all. So when researching for a qualified intermediary, look closely at the following. You want to look at their experience. So find out how many exchanges they've done and how long they've been in service and how many exchange funds that they currently hold. Ask about their fidelity bond because the QI will be holding your funds. It is crucial that you obtain a copy of their fidelity bonds. All QIs should hold fidelity bonds somewhere in the range of about $1 million. Fidelity bonds are insurances that protect businesses from theft or dishonest behavior, such as an employee of the QI's company stealing from your account while in escrow. You should know their errors and omission coverage as well. All qualified intermediaries must have errors and omissions coverage, which protects you if a QI's paperwork mistake causes your exchange to fail. This coverage allows you to collect damages from the insurance company rather than the qualified intermediary. You want to know, how do they manage their funds? Always insist that the funds are held in a segregated escrow account. Verify that your funds will not be commingled with any funds from other clients. This prevents your money from seizure if the QI declares bankruptcy during the exchange process. All qualified intermediaries should hold funds in a separate trust or escrow account in FDIC insured banks. Inquire on their costs and their fees. And for typical exchanges, most QIs charge about $700, but it can go up to $1,500 per transaction. And if you're doing a more complex exchange, the prices can likely increase.
So let's now talk about finding our replacement property. Living in California as rental property owners and managing our own buildings, it would have been ideal to invest close to home. However, the reality of the market conditions led us to consider investing out of state. It is essential to have the right real estate agent, and even more so in a case like ours. Being our first experience with a 1031 exchange, along with investing out of state for the first time, it is key to work with an agent who is very familiar with investment properties and who ideally owns rental property themselves. We looked for agents online. Additionally, we use the Bigger Pockets forums to connect with and interview realtors in various areas of the country, and we ultimately found one we used from there. After researching various areas, we looked in Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, I believe Texas too, yeah. We finally decided on the greater Boise, Idaho area. Now, the realtor we had connected with on Bigger Pockets specialized in multifamily investment properties. He also had investments himself there, and on top of that, he had done 1031 exchange.
That was huge.
He was able to refer us to a lender who had experience with lending on investment properties and a 1031 exchange, and I think they had worked on some projects themselves.
Yeah, they were partners in a couple of projects as well.
So it was nice. It was a nice, cohesive kind of system we had going. Additionally, the middle son had just moved up to the Boise area. So this gave us a little extra peace of mind that he could assist us with the property if needed. What do they say? Boots on the ground?
Yeah. I mean, we're hands-on landlords, and having boots on the ground or someone you know and trust that lives near your out-of-state property was really important to us. Our out-of-state team was really coming together quickly, and that was important to us because we've always self-managed our properties. So having to hand this off to someone else was new to us.
Yeah, so it was real fortunate. So we chose 3 properties in the Boise area. We made an offer on our first choice and sighed with relief when they chose to accept it. Of course, everything doesn't go as planned, and there were some issues with the inspection report that led us to drop out of that property. And all of a sudden, tensions started to grow a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We successfully had our offer accepted on the second property. Now, that was great, but we knew that if for some reason that didn't work out, we'd be down to our final option. Now, this second property, it turned out was a better investment. It was located in an area that was preferable to the first property's location. However, for some reason this sale fell through. We weren't as confident in our third and final choice. But everything seemed to be going pretty smooth with the inspections.
So I'm going to jump in here. I just want to remind people, we had to pick 3 properties within 45 days. We made an offer on our first property and then dropped out of that one. So now we're on our second property, which means we only have one other option left should that second property fall through.
And that 180 days to close, that does not restart. So
No.
that was further down the line also. The new property was a 4-plex, and the cost was a little more than double of what I had sold the land for. The income from this property earned in 2 months was as much as I earned in a year from the land.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about how it started getting really bumpy and made us super nervous. Right. So our realtor, loan officer, qualified intermediary, and the title company worked in unison throughout the entire process. And where Kevin pre-qualified for his loan, the loan company came back after doing their due diligence and asked me to go on the loan with Kevin.
Was a really bizarre
It was,
reason,
yeah, it
but
was
yeah,
crazy.
well,
We don't need to get into that, but
but it was strange.
it was just stupid. Anyway, so here's the problem. Another regulation of a 1031 exchange is you cannot change how title is held in the middle while you're doing this exchange. Changing how title to your property is held or dissolving a partnership during the exchange may cause the exchange to be dishonored due to holding period issues. So the biggest concern, as it turned out, was because I, who did not hold any title in the land, needed to be named on Kevin's loan for the new replacement property. But the sale of land was in Kevin's name only. So, however, in order to qualify for the new loan, I needed to join title for the replacement property. I hope you're following that because it's a little confusing. This was a cause for concern as Kevin had already had his offer accepted. And because time is of the essence, we had to call our CPA on this right away. And glad we did.
Yeah. And of course, we were literally driving up to our family's vacation spot when all this went down.
Yeah. As we drove to the airport to pick up our oldest son and head to our cabin, it was lovely. So it's important to note that having a CPA on our team is invaluable. If you do not have a CPA that understands investment properties and taxes associated with them, you need to get one. The QI cannot give tax or legal advice to exchangers. So it's vital to have a tax or a legal advisor provide you with the advice that you're going to need. And although it's not mandatory, we do recommend retaining an attorney or an accountant to complete an exchange. We found from our CPA, after he had done some research, that we could indeed add a person on title, but only if the value of the property being purchased was 50% more than the property being exchanged. So I'll keep the math simple. If exchanging a $250,000 property with one that has a value of $500,000 or more, you can add a person to title. It's assumed that the exchanger's 50% value is still the full amount exchanged, with the new person adding the additional 50%. And we were grateful to our CPA for this. He provided expert advice and guidance to keep us on track. So our concern was that any delays in the current lending approval process could allow the replacement property owners to back out. And this was going to leave us with very little time to start the loan process all over again. So remember, 45 days to identify 3 properties, 180 days to close on them. And those days go fast. And as we only had the third and final property listed on our replacement selections, we had no idea if it was even still on the market, because we had selected that like over 60 days before.
Yeah. So good news, after a few hours of phone calls and picking our stomachs up off the ground, we got the lender the additional information needed to keep the loan process going, and were able to enjoy our much-needed family vacation. We closed on our replacement investment property and made the trip back to Idaho soon thereafter to inspect the new property. We also wanted to introduce ourselves and meet our tenants. Now, this fourplex had a property manager in place, so we also took time to meet with them.
I want to jump in here real quick and point out that if you haven't listened to it yet, our last podcast was all about inherited tenants when you buy a new rental property, and where we highly recommend using an estoppel certificate. The state of Idaho is one that does not recognize them. As we were using the existing property manager for the complex, our transition was seamless.
So when we met with them, we wanted to explain how we run our properties and express how communication is of the utmost importance to us. We likely will do a podcast on this experience later, as finding a reliable out-of-state property manager is not always so simple.
No, it is not.
We learned so much throughout our first experience with the 1031 exchange. Mostly that all of the moments of concern, trepidation, and worry are really heightened by the ever-present time constraints, along with the finite property choices available. While stressful at times, and it really was, this journey will allow us to grow our investment portfolio and better plan for our future. Would we do it again? If it's financially the best option when the time rolls around, you bet. I hope this podcast encourages you to investigate how a 1031 exchange might benefit your future investment goals. If scaling your portfolio is in the plans for growth, a 1031 likely will help you save by deferring capital gain taxes.
Yeah, so that's our episode all about our experience with our first 1031 exchange. And we appreciate you tuning in and listening, and we hope you have learned a little something from us today. If you'd click that subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast platform and share this podcast with another rental property owner, it really helps boost us in the charts and reach other DIY landlords. We're doing what we can to guide you all to an organized, professional, and streamlined rental property business. And speaking of being organized and professional, we did mention Bigger Pockets is where we found our Idaho-based realtor. And if you're not familiar with Bigger Pockets, they are a real estate investing community. They have educational forums and blogs and podcasts all about rental property investments. But even more importantly, they are a way to network with others in your area. They even offer an investment calculator to help you determine if a property you're looking at purchasing will work within your criteria or not. And we're going to include a link to check them out in the show notes. They're a great resource and have helped us several times over the years. And if you would like to receive a link to our podcast in your email each week, you can subscribe to our free newsletter, Landlord Weekly. It comes out every Tuesday and includes all kinds of tips, early access to our blogs, landlord-specific articles written by other industry pros, our favorite landlord products that we use in our business, and the most recent link to this podcast. You can subscribe at yourlandlordresource.com/subscribe. That's yourlandlordresource.com/subscribe. And we'll also include a link to subscribe in the show notes. Thanks again. I am Stacy, signing off with Kevin. Until next time, you got this, landlords.